Known for his keen sense of style and intense enthusiasm for antiques, Frank Fritz was a well-liked mainstay on American Pickers. Frank's abrupt resignation resulted from simmering tensions between him and the rest of the team behind closed doors. How did things work on the American Pickers set that prompted the producers to take such a severe measure? The reality was more nuanced than fans had realized, ranging from personal disagreements to health issues. Stay in as we reveal the pivotal moment that caused Frank Fritz to abruptly leave the show, permanently altering it. Fans were confused when Mike Wolf appeared alone on American Pickers in 2021. Every year, millions of us eagerly await the release of the newest season of American Pickers. The program has long been a mainstay in many homes, but the most recent iteration lacked a familiar face. Frank Fritz debuted in the March 2020 edition of American Pickers, having been a part of the show since its inception. But when Season 22 eventually arrived on television in January 2021, the selector had vanished from sight, seemingly forever. Of all American Pickers has had to find filming dates because of the pandemic, but did that mean Frank was out of a job for good? Frank Fritz claims he hasn't been fired, but hasn't been asked to return to American Pickers. Naturally, many American Pickers viewers were curious about Frank Fritz's whereabouts and potential return, especially in light of the recent speculations about the show's future. Before the crew persuaded him to stay in 2016, Mike Wolf initially intended to quit the series. Then there's the question of whether or not the show is real and if those incredible discoveries on picks came from the producers. Fans of American Pickers are currently discussing Frank's fate. At first, everyone kept quiet, with Frank only telling the U.S. Sun, "I didn't leave the show." Fans of American Pickers believe Frank Fritz's illness was caused by his extreme weight loss. Frank Fritz's appearance and apparent dramatic weight loss in the weeks leading up to his last broadcasts have been among the topics of conversation in recent years. Frank's illness, which has, in a sense, been for many years, was cause for concern for many. Fortunately, the sickness won't claim his life anytime soon. Frank used social media in 2013 to discuss his continuous struggle with Crohn's disease. He said he just ran with it when he began to lose weight and had to take a break for seasons 8 and 9 of American Pickers. Additionally, Frank wants to express his gratitude for all of your kind words of concern. Frank Fritz is 65 pounds lighter than last seen on our screens. Frank Fritz had recently lost weight, but no one knew about it until he spoke out to the U.S. Sun. It seems it all began when he decided to adopt a healthier lifestyle to manage his condition and enhance his general well-being. Frank acknowledged that he had already shed an impressive 65 pounds and had no intention of stopping anytime soon. Not only has the American Pickers star been watching what I'm eating and just eating healthy, he also admitted during his interview, ultimately it all added up to Frank's hectic schedule of taking care of the grass and getting rid of the weeds outside his house and scheduling a little bit more walking. The American Pickers actor has also abstained from alcohol for nearly a whole year. Frank Fritz has lost significant weight, but it's not only because he exercises more and pays attention to what fuels his body. An additional incentive is the celebrity's decision to give up alcohol. It seems that his grandfather and mother both suffered from alcohol addictions and passed away after spending a long time overcoming personal issues. Frank felt this was a sufficient wake-up call to reflect on his life. Frank says he was almost at the year mark but had one slip-up for 4 hours and had to restart the clock. He can proudly tell the world that he's been on the wagon for almost 9-10 months. Thankfully, he reports that the following day he was prepared to try again. He spent 77 days in rehab to get to the root of the problem. It turns out that Frank Fritz's decision to check himself into a 77-day recovery facility to overcome his alcoholism is one of the reasons he's been out of the spotlight. Frank revealed in an interview with the U.S. Sun that he attended the Abbey Center in Iowa, where he received all the guidance he required to kick his addiction. As he puts it, it was not a retreat where he could eat meals and watch TV all day, where he was booked up to 13 or 14 hours a day. Frank claims that instead he read 12 self-help books and had a lot of one-on-one time. As a result, he's now motivated to assist others who are facing comparable challenges. Frank Fritz blames his drinking on splitting from his long-term partner. Rumors abound regarding what initially motivated Frank Fritz to take alcohol. It appeared for several months that his back surgery was the cause. While this contributed to the star's situation spiraling out of hand, it was no longer the only reason Frank reached for the bottle. He also used it to heal after splitting from Diane Bankson, his longtime partner. By 2017, the couple had been engaged and living together for a long time. But after they split up, everything was different. Frank went so far as to admit to the U.S. Sun that I tried to drink her away, but sadly this only made his problems worse. According to Diane Bankson, Frank cheated on her and was caught red-handed. Many people were curious about why Frank Fritz and Diane Bankson parted ways. Was the story just a simple case of their falling out of love with one another? Frank's drinking problems appeared to indicate that their relationship was far more profound than the public was aware of at the time. Frank had shielded the media from his private life for a long time. Ultimately, he avoided discussing Diane on American Pickers and isn't renowned for providing candid, tell-all interviews. Diane? She was determined that everyone be made aware of the suspected infidelity of Frank in their relationship. "I walked in and caught him in bed with another woman," she said to the U.S. Sun. Frank claims that Diane was the one who was unfaithful in their relationship. Diane asserts that Frank was the one who cheated, but in reality, he admits it began with Diane. Frank told the U.S. Sun that he had bought a brand new house and thought he would marry Diane. He was candid about changing his life for her. Sadly, Frank claims that during his absence, Diane had a boyfriend back there. The reality personality claims that before finding out the truth and choosing to exact revenge on his previous fiancée, Diane had been dating for 2.5 years. Naturally, two wrongs don't make a right, but everyone was curious about who was telling the truth. It came down to who had cheated on their partner first. The American Pickers star also says that Diane allegedly wasn't telling the truth. Frank Fritz criticized his ex-fiancée in several interviews, saying that Diane had given false information. Frank is committed to standing up for what he believes to be the truth, even though nobody is sure who's telling the truth. First off, Frank tells the U.S. Sun that Diane never saw him with another woman since he only had someone over at the house. Frank even goes so far as to say that's all it was, but that wasn't the end of the story. Frank claims that being with Diane and their breakup cost me 6 figures. In 2021, the American Pickers star claimed that he got the tattoo, "Once a cheater, always a cheater," to remind me not to make the same mistake again. According to reports, the last straw was a fireworks-related event that harmed Diane. Frank Fritz and Diane Bankson reconciled and stayed in their farmhouse despite what seemed to be adultery in their relationship. That is, until Diane claims Frank and his friend decided to light fireworks. The two had been drinking, she said to the U.S. Sun, and she had no interest in participating in their antics. Diane went so far as to claim that despite placing the fireworks in a closed container, Frank and his companion couldn't get them to light. The container didn't fire up until she subsequently put something ablaze into it, severely burning her hand and arm with third-degree burns. Diane's attorneys even said that the injury caused her eyelashes and eyebrows to fall out. Diane Bankson claims Frank refused to get her help and tried to sue the American Pickers star. Diane claims that Frank refused to get her any aid or take her to the hospital, instead telling her to toughen up until she got herself to the hospital a few days later to receive treatment for her burns. This is one of the purported significant sources of contention for Diane. At that point, it said that the two parted ways. The U.S. Sun reported that Diane intended to sue Frank for $50,000, citing mental and emotional hardship as well as pain and suffering brought on by the fireworks incident. Even more, according to Diane, as soon as they broke up, Frank changed the locks on their joint house. Ultimately, in March 2020, she dropped the lawsuit. Mike Wolf verified that Frank Fritz needed back surgery. The fact that American Pickers star Frank Fritz has been recovering from back surgery is another reason for his sudden silence. This took many show viewers aback since they were unaware that Frank had been suffering in quiet for several months. Ultimately, he needed professional assistance to tackle the problem because it was too much for him to handle. It was Mike Wolf who informed everyone that Frank was having back surgery. He did not, however, explain the procedure or the initial cause of the back problems. Frank ultimately needed 185 stitches and 2 rods inserted into his back. Frank Fritz blamed his back injury on American Pickers. The public didn't know the initial reason for Frank Fritz's back problems until he spoke with the U.S. Sun. Frank claims that anyone who watches the show can see who the guy is that's lifting all the time. All the constant lifting was enough to leave him with permanent damage that could only be fixed through surgery. He knows exactly what did it, and it all stemmed from working on American Pickers. Frank even revealed that he had been hurting for a long time regarding his back discomfort. Ultimately, viewers were left wondering if the show knew Frank's problems and why he was allowed to turn things around given how much suffering he was. According to a source, American Pickers does not intend to return Frank Fritz. Many people wonder if Frank Fritz will return to American Pickers. Everyone involved with the show, including the cast, seems quiet since Frank failed to show up in the most recent season. According to a History Channel insider, Frank did not align with the network's vision for the franchise's big picture. Eventually, an official from the network informed Entertainment Weekly that Frank's tenure on American Pickers had ended on July 21, 2021. Even though it appeared that Frank had officially left the show, there may be more behind the scenes, especially when other people are engaged. Finally, Mike Wolf discusses Frank Fritz's exclusion from the show. Mike Wolf didn't reveal where his co-star had disappeared until everyone talked about American Pickers and whether Frank Fritz would make a comeback. However, Mike didn't clarify any rumors circulating or defend Frank with his remarks. Instead, Mike took to social media, calling Frank his brother and stating that he'd known the former co-star for as long as I can remember. The cryptic part came when Mike talked about the highs and lows, blessings and challenges that came with working on American Pickers over the previous 11 years. Mike said, "I will miss Frank," to sum everything up. Frank Fritz reacted angrily to Mike Wolf's remarks right away. Following Mike Wolf's remarks, Frank Fritz did not hesitate to express his opinions. As it happened, he wasn't exactly impressed with what his former co-star had to say and wanted everyone to know how he felt about it all. Before he made any audacious assertions, Frank described the statement using some colorful terminology. Frank even went so far as to accuse Mike of lying in his testimony, telling the U.S. Sun that someone wrote it out for him. Frank claimed in the interview that he and Mike were never friends in grade school. Frank seemed to believe that Mike was using the statement to give the impression that their relationship was closer than it was on the show. He claimed that the American Pickers actors used to get along like brothers. Frank Fritz told the U.S. Sun that he and Mike Wolf had known each other for about 40 years and that their team had a lot of chemistry together, so things between them always appeared so easy. Frank and Mike went between selections together a lot, therefore spending a lot of time in their van was crucial to the episode's plot. It seemed that they could complete each other's sentences at some point. Frank acknowledged that things between him and Mike were terrific when everyone was getting along and there's no drama, but it seemed like everything had changed since Mike started filming American Pickers with his brother. Frank claims that it's been 2 years since they last communicated. The most significant revelation from Frank Fritz's candid interview with the U.S. Sun was his assertion that he hadn't spoken to Mike Wolf in 2 years. Many American Pickers viewers thought that they were best of friends and that nothing could ever get in the way of them for more than 10 years. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case. Frank acknowledged that we haven't spoken for 2 years and that it was 100% truth. Although he didn't name any specific individuals, his statement said, "I don't like that people lie to people," may have hinted that he was referring to a particular American Pickers character. The pair allegedly only got on when Mike was being mean to someone. Friends can get along in a variety of ways. Some people enjoy spending time together and engaging in similar pastimes. Some seem to chuckle at everything and anything, even when it never appears to register with everyone else. What happens if someone wishes to dedicate their time to treating others poorly? Frank Fritz claimed that would be the only occasion he and Mike would ever grow close. In addition, Frank feels that Mike failed to say 5 nice things to him in the 10 years that they collaborated on the show. He told the U.S. Sun they would only laugh when Mike was cutting somebody else down. It ultimately left him with a somewhat sour taste in his mouth. Frank Fritz's back issue was a significant source of contention. Of course, the majority of individuals don't want to get injured. When Frank Fritz found out that he would require surgery to help address years of back problems, he had a lot on his plate. But it appears that this could have been a big source of contention in his relationship with Mike Wolf. Frank revealed to the U.S. Sun that he felt abandoned by his erstwhile pal Mike, saying that Mike didn't call me after his surgery. Frank seems to have severed his relationship with his past because he didn't receive a call from his friend or support from American Pickers. He even went so far as to declare, "If you don't like me anymore, that's your problem." Shared tension appeared to be another issue on American Pickers. The official cause of conflict between Mike Wolf and Frank Fritz is still unknown. Nevertheless, Frank has shared some details about his experience co-starring with his former partner. Many people may not be surprised by his admission that American Pickers has always been tilted toward him 1,000%, given that Mike is the show's originator and executive producer. However, there could have been some problems brought on by the unfairness. Frank compared his tenure on American Pickers to that of Aerosmith's Steven Tyler, claiming that even while the other band members contributed to the music, he was always the band's frontman. Frank finally said, "That's no problem with me." Frank Fritz feels like he was always more well-liked by the audience. Frank Fritz, who told the U.S. Sun that he is more of a regular guy who enjoys pizza and drinking on the weekends, feels that he's always been more popular with viewers because he's seemingly more relatable than other people on American Pickers. This belief has surprised a lot of people. He compared this with some arrogant series cast members. Frank prefers to buy signs for $150 instead of $8,000. Frank seems this makes him more personable, and people have fallen for his manner of picking over the previous 10 years. This is another thing that's purportedly made Frank more popular with show fans. Frank hinted that Mike Wolf is always looking for big-ticket items. Unsurprisingly, Mike Wolf constantly looks for expensive stuff when he goes on a pick. After all, there's a greater likelihood of making a significant profit on more oversized items, right? Mike seems to think that, but not everyone on American Pickers agrees. To begin with, Danielle Colby has always been in charge of the pick budget and frequently has to set boundaries for Frank and Mike to ensure they don't run out of money. A further factor is that, in Frank's opinion, the small scores are the bread and butter. He thinks the company would have failed without the lesser sales because they wouldn't have generated consistent revenue. She also stated that Frank must be made to answer for his deeds. Danielle shared her thoughts on the subject throughout her social media posts, suggesting she had much to say. Danielle expressed her wish for things to have been different to her followers in this instance. But is there more to the story than she's prepared to share with the public? Some of the clues she mentioned are that people must be accountable for our actions, and that pain Frank has allegedly caused himself and those around him. Just when it looked like we might finally get an answer, Danielle admitted she didn't want to speak ill of someone who needs help, so she wouldn't say anything more. Frank Fritz has been off social media as he believes it's all fake. Avoiding social media is something that a lot of us attempt to do daily. After all, it's simple to become engrossed in comparing our lives to those of others and questioning why we haven't accomplished this or don't appear that way. We're not alone. It seems, as Frank Fritz told the U.S. Sun, that he had been avoiding social media since it's all fake. However, that doesn't mean fans haven't heard from him, since it looks like someone has been updating his official page while Frank has been away. As he never posted anything on here, Frank acknowledged that he had no idea who was posting that stuff. Danielle Colby has been sharing pictures of herself with Mike Wolf's sibling. If he leaves the program, who will take Frank Fritz's position is just one of the many questions American Pickers fans have. Danielle Colby looked like she'd step into his shoes and become a picker instead of the base runner. That dream was short-lived when Mike invited his brother to appear in the program. Danielle posted a throwback photo of herself and Robbie, so they also have a long history together. Is he going to be the next star of the show? Many people think that, but regrettably, not everyone is pleased with the newcomer to the scene. It appears from Robbie's social media accounts that he's now a regular cast member of the show. Frank Fritz alleges Robbie Wolf to have replaced him on American Pickers. Frank Fritz is among the numerous individuals who find Robbie Wolf's participation in American Pickers unimpressive. He was one of the show's main characters for many years, but Robbie seems to have replaced him entirely now that they have a quarrel and convoluted past. Even though Frank and Mike seem to have fallen out, the former still doesn't know why he's behaving like that towards me, Frank told the U.S. Sun. Some fans applauded the change, stating that Mike and Robbie will have chemistry because of their history. Frank believes Mike wants his brother Robbie to replace me. Regrettably, not everybody favors Frank being kicked out so quickly. He states that he hopes to revisit American Pickers in the future. Despite everything that's transpired between him and Mike over the past several months, Frank Fritz told the U.S. Sun, "I would like to come back," suggesting that he hasn't completely ruled out the possibility of returning to American Pickers. Frank has committed much of his life to the project and worked on it for 11 years. Frank appeared to imply in his interview that friction behind the scenes might be related to Mike's divorce from Jodie Faith. Frank is aware that in any event, it's up to the network to make the final decision, and that dealing with the worldwide pandemic has always been challenging. Frank Fritz acknowledges that not having spoken to Mike Wolf in a while, things would be heated on set. If Frank Fritz were to return to American Pickers, a lot would change. After all, it's said that Frank and Mike haven't spoken in the past 2 years, so it would be hard for them to reconcile and get things back on track. Finally, conflict can result from what they both said in media interviews. Frank's remarks against his former co-star have been anything but flattering. Is there any chance this will be resolved and everything can return to normal? Time will tell. The show American Pickers will be different if one of the main characters doesn't show up on our screens, even if many things would change if Frank did return. Frank Fritz seemed upset with Danielle Colby after his recent remarks. Frank Fritz and Mike Wolf are generally pretty discreet about their personal lives, which is just one of the many things we've discovered about them over the years. After all, this public spat is the first time we've heard either discuss anything unrelated to American Pickers. Nevertheless, Danielle Colby is one person who has never had any issue expressing her actual feelings. She's been acquainted with Mike for a long time. This much is known. She now appears willing to go to any lengths, including taking matters into her own hands, to defend her friend. Danielle seemed to be targeting Frank when she posted a sign on social media about people who can't say anything nice. It appears that Frank Fritz might make a surprise return to television shortly. Many fans are eager for Frank Fritz to return to television and find it difficult to believe that his time on American Pickers may end. Frank stated that he's not done giving his followers what they desire, even though the feud is still at a standstill. He even admitted to the U.S. Sun that thousands of people want Frank to return to the small screen and that there is a petition to get me back on the show. Frank may go to a new show that will be just as much fun if he doesn't get his slot back. Developing a competing TV program is one way to hit Mike Wolf where it hurts. After appearing on American Pickers, Frank Fritz hasn't picked as much lately. Frank has not kept up his picking since stepping away from the spotlight, even though many want him back on the small screen. Most of his time seems to have been spent improving himself, attending follow-up treatment programs, and working on motorcycles. Because he was involved in it for the past 40 years, he was even admitted to the Sturgis Hall of Fame. Frank appears to be finally living at his own pace when he's not working on bikes. After spending so many years traveling, Frank's desire to take things more slowly might not be a massive surprise. Still, if rumors about a new show are accurate, it could not last long. If you've watched the video till here, that means you've enjoyed the video. Subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notifications bell icon